My name is Scott Smith. I have been in law enforcement for 28 years. I grew up in the Northeast in a small town named Lisbon, Connecticut. And it was very much a dairy farming town. It wasn't big at all. But over time, Boston and New York seemed to just kind of crowd everybody out. And the dairy farmers realized they could get more money for their land than they could their milk. So they started selling their land, and it got developed really quickly. As my children were tiny and they were getting older, I didn't really want to raise them in the atmosphere that had become New England. It's very liberal up there. Mm-hmm. I used to come down to Tennessee and visit my uncle. He served United States Army, so he was stationed at Fort Campbell. And we used to come down during the summertime, and I just remember how beautiful Tennessee was. And I decided to move my family here to Tennessee. And we've been here, I think, almost 14 years now. So I raised my boys here. This is a great place to raise children. God is still in the equation down here, very much so, which I wanted to raise my children in that atmosphere. Anyways, I was in law enforcement up there in a large city department. I started out in the United States Military Police Corps. And after that, I left and became a city police officer in the city of Norwich, Connecticut. And it was a rather large department and very professional. And I loved it. I loved each and every minute of it. It's all I've ever wanted to do. But after a certain time, I reached a certain point in my career there that I realized it was kind of stalling and it was maybe time to retire. But I came down here, and after some time I realized I still had more to offer to law enforcement, and I miss it dearly. So I started as a reserve deputy when they were still in the old jail over there off the square. And they moved into the new jail, and I began working the midnight shift in the jail as a correctional officer. And then became a sergeant in the correctional officer part of it. And they needed a detective, and that's where my talents were. So I went over and became a detective on the law enforcement side and solved some pretty good cases over there, did a lot of hard work. Became the chief deputy. And when I was a chief deputy for a while there for Sheriff Ward, I wanted to move higher. I knew my talents were in leadership and management. So I went and became the chief of police over in Fairview and did that for 6 months. It was an interim position, and they hired a new city manager, and he wanted to take the department a certain direction, and I wanted to take it another direction. So here I am. Yep. I'm working narcotics here in the county for the Sheriff's Department. A couple points. I have a varied toolbox to go to from my experience that I've had. I have experience from the military, right, and that taught me certainly departmental discipline or organizational discipline. And then I have my experience from a large city department, which I learned so much from. And then, of course, I worked here in the Sheriff's Department in a rural Sheriff's Department. So I have a pretty deep toolbox I can go to solve problems for Hickman County. A lot of experience, a lot of eclectic experience. It's different. So I can't just fall back on, well, this is what we've always done here. Right. I have other experiences to go to. So I think that certainly does set me apart from the other candidates. My greatest achievement is kind of a twofold thing. I'm still married to the same woman for we're going to be 30 years this August in law enforcement. You don't hear that very much in law enforcement. It's hard to do. Yeah. But I still love my wife dearly, and we're still married to this day. And the other side of that is raising 3 good boys. You know, they're my the light of my life, I guess. You know, I have one that just got out of the Army. He did amazing things when he was in the Citadel in the Army. He was an Army Ranger graduate. I have another son, my oldest son, Aiden, who worked for the NSA, and now he's in the private sector doing cybersecurity. And my youngest son, Connor, is a commercial diver. So they're all out there doing some pretty amazing things, so I'm very proud of that. Professionally, I just worked hard in this profession. I'm very proud of that. I got to solve some really big crimes here in Hickman County. We put a serial killer away. He killed a young woman here in Bucks North, and we finally caught up with him through DNA. The Jeffrey Ola homicide, which sat dormant for like 13 years, I picked that case file up and went to work on it, and we got that solved. Some things I did as a chief deputy, the fleet was in really bad shape, and their practice was they had just as much money in the vehicle line item as they did in car parts. Huh. So yeah, that wasn't the way to go. It was a waste of taxpayer money, $70,000 for car parts. So I just thought the problem at a different angle, outside the box. I went to the county commission, and I took just about half or more than half of that line item for car parts and put it into automobiles. And then we took a little more money from the drug fund, and we started buying new cars every year. So they come warranted. So any major repair is covered. And the vehicle parts are just for oil filters, oil, gas, things like that. So now the deputies have really good cars to drive around in. And I know some people don't understand that that's their office. They have to sit in that car all day long and do their paperwork and get to calls. And you want that deputy to be able to get to that call, you know, in a safe manner without it breaking down. And that wasn't always the case when we were getting these used patrol cars. And we went to get 3 more deputies from the county commission when the meth labs were really giving us a problem. We don't see the meth labs too much anymore, but we still see a lot of meth. Yeah. It's almost kind of flip-flopped. The reason why meth labs were such a problem because you had to have a deputy to stand by with that meth lab until a cleanup crew could get there, and a lot of times they came out of Chattanooga. Wow. So that deputy was tied up. He was done. He was there for the whole shift. But now we still have a problem with methamphetamine and opioids, and we really got to hit that head on. We just can't play patty cake with it anymore. It's killing us. Yeah. Well, the issues in the county, like I said, right now, the meth problem and the opioid abuse is it's horrible. The overdoses that we're getting out of that, and the burden that it's putting on this county. Most of these people that are drug addicted do not have health insurance. Right. And they have health problems because they're addicted to a drug. So we're picking up that tab. If we can put an end to that or push them out of Hickman County, which is what you do. The sheriff cannot stop the drug problem. It's a bigger problem than himself and his department. But what he can do and what you do is you push it out of your community. And that's what I plan to do with these community response teams that I've mentioned before, is push the drug and methamphetamine problem out of the county. If you can do that, a lot of stuff follows. Your burglaries will go down, your domestic violence will go down, your property crimes will go down, because most of those are fueled by drug abuse or drug dealers. Yeah. Yep. So I think if the voters really look at that hard and my plan to combat that, a lot of different headaches will be solved. Mm-hmm. From what I've seen, every society has their accepted narcotic. In the United States, it's alcohol. In the Middle East, a lot of it is the opioids or opiates. Mm-hmm. They accept them. Right now, there's a big battle over marijuana legalization. I don't really have an opinion on that, but get back to your question. Some of the drug abuse comes from, not hereditary, but what's the word I'm looking for? The family's always done it. Yeah. You know, mom and dad abuse drugs, the kids are going to abuse drugs. And then their kids will abuse drugs. It's a cycle that they get into. And that one is probably the hardest one to break because they don't look at it as something bad. Yeah. You know, my dad died at, I'm just saying hypothetically, my dad died at 50 years old from drug abuse. That's probably the route I'm going. So they just, you know, they accept it. Others are, the opioid abuse is classic example of commercial drug companies pushing a drug. And if you go back and research OxyContin, the pharmaceuticals had a great painkiller, and they went out and pushed it, and told the medical industry that it wasn't addictive, and it was highly addictive. And we're still suffering from that, and that began in the late 80s, early 90s, and we're still trying to pick ourselves up with our bootstraps from that mess. So misinformation about certain drugs, some people lend themselves to addiction. I think it's in their DNA. It's how their body handles the introduction of a narcotic, and their body just craves it. There's a really good doctor. I think he's the head of the Tennessee drug abuse for the state, and he does a great speech on this, and he said he can get anybody addicted within 14 days. And if you and that's a big thing that they're trying to make now into law, is that doctors can only prescribe painkillers for 5 days now, instead of giving out these big, long prescriptions where people just get addicted. And once they're addicted, now it's a problem. It's a huge problem, because it's not easy to quit. And it takes resources, money.
Yes.
But yeah, I think one is familial. The other one is it just happens that people just happen to get addicted because they try new things, and the other one is, they get addicted through painkillers.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody sets out to be drug addicted. It kind of happens, and it's all external influences. Information. That's what we get, how we take care of most of our problems, is by receiving information. If you see something, say something. You see burglary in progress, call us. If you know something about something that happened, let us know. Not all the time do we have to disclose where we got our information from. We do it all the time in narcotics with informants. We issue them a number, and that's all they're called in our paperwork. Nobody knows who they are. So I know some people might have some misgivings about talking to the law enforcement or the police, but that's how we operate. That's how we get most of our work done, is through information from the public. And that's the biggest help, I think. Another part is, when department heads ask for things, they're not trying to create this big kingdom. They need these things. There's wants and needs. And right now in Hickman County, we're just trying to get our needs. And sometimes you got to pay for those needs. And I'm a taxpayer. I'm not a big fan of paying taxes, but I know you have to. And to get more deputies out on the road, we're going to have to come off a little bit of money sometimes and pay for those needs. So that's another way to support the Sheriff's Department, and not necessarily saying that you have to pay more taxes, but go to your county commissioner and say, we want more deputies. They're the liaison between the public and the budget. So if you want to see something happen, go to your commissioner and tell them what you want. And then in that way, it's not such a hardship on the sheriff to go to the county commission and say, I need a few more deputies because we're not getting the job done. And they might not be so hesitant when they hear the public saying, we need more law enforcement. That's another big help. There's a couple ways. One is you can advertise in the paper. That's one way. I think if elected, I want to start this Citizens Academy, and I am sure I will get some reserve deputies out of that. That's another good way, because when they get in there and see what the job's about, they're going to be like, I think I might want to do this, or give it a try at least. And that's another good thing for the sheriff, because they get to watch these reserve deputies and see how they interact with the public. And they can make a decision there. He might not be a good deputy, or he might be a fantastic deputy, because I've watched him for this past year out on the streets with people, or my sergeants have watched him, or my lieutenants have watched him. So it's a great resource to go get people from. And so, yeah, advertising, getting the word out, and I think that Citizens Academy is going to draw a lot of people to that. I think the county's ready for a culture change in the Sheriff's Department. More towards professionalism. I know it's a small rural sheriff's department, but that doesn't mean that we can't be highly professional. And that's what I want to bring to the table. It's not going to be easy. Culture change is never easy, but I have the energy, the training, and the know-how to get that done. So I need their vote on August 2nd.